Well, hey everyone. My name's Scott, and this is my buddy Nathan. And we are starting a new book today. This is actually a letter from the New Testament from the earthly brother of Jesus. Now, as Andy Stanley says, this is one of the reasons to believe the Bible. This is what makes the Bible one of many, but believable, because how many people would bow down to their brother, right? I mean, let's be honest here. So,
what an older brother complex that would have been.
Wow. So with that said, Nathan, I know you feel the same way. The book of James has so many recovery principles in it that we wanted to work our way through it and pull out some of those principles. It's very practical, very hands-on, but it also speaks a lot to our recovery. And so with that said, we're going to break chapter 1 up into 2 sections. So Nathan, why don't you start? Tell us what stood out to you from this first section of James chapter 1.
Well, coming out the gate, I mean, I do like that James is an encourager. You know, it may sound weird to be saying, hey, count it joy to face trials. But in that time period, you know, there was a lot going on. And it was quite a tumultuous time to be alive. And so he is basically saying, hey, have a different perspective. You know, we see things differently because we are Christians, and we handle them differently. We handle them with a different mindset. And I mean, joy, a different emotional starting point as well. And we can be in charge of that. We can change the way that we're thinking about things. And that paragraph, he's saying, ask God, believe it, because ones that aren't in belief are tossed around by waves, as so many circumstances in that time period, even for ourselves, just COVID itself, right? But he's saying that, you know, belief, and what I love about James is he connects it with this, in my opinion, and it's an embodied faith, you know, when he says in other passages that we'll get to, but it means that belief isn't just, it isn't passive. It is an active and action-oriented faith. It is a conscious and intentional way of thinking and feeling and using our body as well, all in trust with God. And when you are following that pathway, if you will, it is, I mean, that's where he's trying to say this is life. Life is, it has to be lived intentionally. It has to be looked at from the right perspective. It has to be handled with the right kind of emotional capacity. So I do love James as well. And that's just the first thing that I wanted to mention in just this short passage. So, but I'm going to give it over to you because I know that you love this book too.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, imagine, or I'm sitting here as you're speaking, imagining these first century followers of Christ reading this letter, many of whom were probably facing or have already faced, or their family members have faced, persecution by Nero, who, I apologize for being graphic, but was known to burn Christians as effectively as candles for his parties. And imagine reading this letter, and the first thing you see is, dear brothers and sisters, when trouble comes your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. I mean, in some ways, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm reading this, and I'm kind of sitting on the bank of the stream, watching the water flow by me, and I'm looking and thinking about the water, These guys, these original recipients, they were in the stream. They were reading this and it was real time. They were part of it. And I can't imagine what they did with this. And so he does go on. I do think there's a lot of recovery in here because it says, for when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. Now, theologically, we could go a couple places that we won't go. Some might argue, well, God, those who believe in exhaustive divine determinism, God has fully planned out everything. And so God has planned this opportunity that you're facing as something for you to grow through. Or you might view it as God has given us free wills and we've made decisions along the way that put us in this situation. But regardless of where you come from, where we find ourselves today in those troubles, we know that God can use it. And it is an opportunity for it. In the I'm reading from the NLT. I love that it says that this will give your endurance a chance to grow. And so regardless of where we find ourselves, we can look at our situation, our hurt, or habit, or hang up, whether we caused it, somebody else caused it. And we can say, this is an opportunity for us to grow and to be more mature and to become more like Christ.
Mm-hmm. And I like how towards the end of this section, he's reminding us of God's character. He's saying, consider it joy. But by the end, he's saying, just remember, every good and perfect gift is from above, Father of heavenly lights. Heavenly lights. I just think as a child, children love any kind of twinkly lights, any kind of fireworks, those kind of things. That just is awe and wonder, and just creating that difference, the knowledge between God's character and what we're facing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say that if we lack wisdom, we should ask God for it. And so again, whatever our situation is, we can say, Lord, I feel incredibly tempted right now. And as I teach my children to do and try and live out myself, in that moment, we can pray for wisdom and we can ask this very important question: what's the wise thing to do in this circumstance? Now it's easy to say that objectively, but when that temptation is so strong, if I ask the question, what's the wise thing to do, on my own, I may say, well, the wise thing to do is, whatever your situation, but let's just throw some out: not to drink, not to take the drug, not to overeat, not to gamble, not to spend too much, not to enter into yet another relationship, not to be compulsive, not to be, you name it. I can objectively say that, but the pull is so strong. And even though I know wisdom says, don't do this, it feels like I can't stop myself. And so maybe the best answer is, what's the wise thing to do? Maybe I better pick up the phone and call Nathan, or pick up the phone and call a sponsor, right?
That is a great example. Picking up the phone. I think that's a great visual that people can grasp, because, when it says you must believe and not doubt, I think, in that same example, doubting would be, I'm not going to call my sponsor, or I'm not going to call Scott to hear his wisdom, because either I don't want to hear it, or I don't think it's going to help me in this situation. And that's what I mean by, embodied, it takes effort to partner with that. It takes actual decisions. And so we may say flippantly in a prayer, well, help me have wisdom. But if we're not consciously pursuing, or at least partnering with God in a way that grows our wisdom, then that's the doubt. The doubt is, well, I'm not going to decide to make that decision to call, or um, or learn with someone in this situation, or be connected to someone in my group or someone at church or whoever. And that's where you see the result is then you're just tossed about because you've made a decision to be isolated in your own thinking, which ends up being very reactionary, right? A reactionary lifestyle, tossed
Yep.
about.
In verses 9 through 11, when I was reading through it, and I know all of James doesn't refer to recovery proper, so to speak, but I reread it and just listen to these words for a moment. Believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them, and those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a little flower. The hot sun rises and the grass withers, the little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all of their achievements. And I thought, is there any connection there? And if I take the liberty of exchanging the word riches, because he's presenting riches, obviously, in one hand, it's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a blessing. On the other hand, it can be something that causes me great pride. It can challenge me. It can challenge my mindset. It can challenge my need for God. And I thought, what if we take the challenge of riches and we replace it with another challenge? What if it's the challenge of anything I just named? Let's just say gambling.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's the challenge of gambling or any other habit or hang-up? Then when I replace that, the concept that's being taught here remains the same. If gambling is what I'm seeking, really winning, it's the dopamine adrenaline rush of winning. I can then insert that in this passage and say, you know what? Winning will fade away. Just like riches will fade away, winning will fade away. It won't last. And what James is saying here, instead of making winning your God or your idol, he said, instead, seek the one who never fades away. 117, the second part of 117, jumping ahead for just a moment, he says, as you just shared, whatever's good and perfect comes down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in heaven. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. Think about all the things we seek after in recovery to medicate our pain. But in this case, gambling and winning, that will fade away. But instead, why not, James says, seek after the one who never fades away. And it's a powerful recovery principle.
I just a quick note as well. I do also think he's adding this note of dignity to whichever position you're in as well. So there can be the right kind of pride where he's saying, hey, if you're in humble circumstances, you should be proud of the fact that you're making it.
Yeah.
You're living well. Or there's humility, that even when you're rich, there's dignity in being humble. And so we look at this value, whether you are rich or poor, in these positions that just kind of declare, hey, when you're proud of what you've accomplished, when you need to be humble as well, there's dignity in both settings. He kind of flipped it upside down, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, he always does that.
Absolutely. There's a common saying in recovery, which is one moment at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time. And when you look at James 1:12, similarly, he says, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And I just think our recovery is day upon day. I mean, we celebrate this. I was just talking, so excited we had, obviously, we had 3 new people last night at Celebrate Recovery. And we were talking about, I was sharing about our chip and coin ceremony, which we have not done since we restarted in person, but I would like to restart soon. And that is a celebration because we literally are marking days. Now we mark them in terms of months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, coming into years. But recovery is a journey. It is usually not a light switch. It's usually one day, one moment at a time. And so God blesses us in patience. And it's work. It says endure, patiently endure testing and temptation. But there is a crown of life that God has promised to those who love him.
Amen.
And then last part, I'm going to jump ahead, live a life, gratitude came through, live a life of gratitude to the giver of all good gifts. And again, that's 1:17. Whatever, as I already read, as you already mentioned, great recovery verse, whatever is good and perfect comes down to us from God, our Father. Translation, live a life of gratitude to the good one who is the giver of all good things. You know, I may have made some mistakes along the way. Obviously, I have, we all have. And that's me. I am accountable because God has made me responsible. And so those things have come because of decisions that I've made. However, God is the giver of all good gifts. He is the giver of all good gifts. And I have 3 other guys that I've mentioned this before, I think on these videos, but we do what we call a gratitude group. And we just use an app. And every day, one of us posts a gratitude verse. And then we do our own gratitude journaling, however we do it, in our own way. And when we do that, we go to our group app and we simply say 3 words. I'm grateful today. All of us say the same thing. We don't post what we're grateful for in the gratitude app or the app. We just say I'm grateful today. And that's a signal to the other guys that we did our gratitude journaling privately.
It's a strong rhythm. And one day at a time, it makes a huge difference in the end. I think it's awesome to, continue to say these small things are the big things.
That's right. Yeah, and gratitude is such a huge part of recovery.
Yeah.
We see it in Celebrate Recovery, in Secular Recovery, again and again. There's something very powerful. We might, bumper sticker wisdom might say, it's looking at the glass half full instead of half empty. Like I can look at my life today and I can say, I can't believe all that's going on, which is reality. I can also look and say, well, you know what? There's also some other things going on that in my belief are gifts from God. And I want to make sure I take a moment to thank God for those gifts. Okay.
Amen.
Very good. Well, that is section 1 of chapter 1. We'll do the second section on our next session. So we hope that you join us for that. So thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, guys. Or we'll see you in person at our next CR meeting on Mondays. So see you next time, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.